Hey everybody, today's guest is singer-songwriter Chris Shiflett from Los Angeles, California. Everyone knows Chris is the lead guitarist for the Foo Fighters, but Chris is also an alumni of both No Use for a Name and Me First and the Gimme Gimmes. Surprisingly, he has also found the time to record 3 solo albums, and the track we are breaking down today is called West Coast Town, taken from his 2017 debut solo album of the same name. The song is rooted in Americana and country, and Chris was mindful to keep the lyrics in that storyteller kind of mode. Producer Dave Cobb really brought these songs to life, bringing in world-class musicians from Nashville, where they tracked the record at the legendary RCA Studio A. According to Chris, this was freeing, as it gave him the opportunity to truly concentrate on the music and the lyrics. Chris cited Buck Owens as a big influence on this particular project, and while I can certainly hear that here, I distinctly hear a Southern California punk rock attitude in the vocal delivery. So for all this and a surprise backing vocalist, don't you dare go anywhere.
Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast.
Well, hey Chris, how's it going?
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. It has been a hot minute, and I had to go back and think, and I just want to start off by saying I have so looked up to you and admired your career, what you've done.
Oh, thank you.
I've not only gotten to know you, but I've gotten to know your brother Scott very well. Saw him not too long ago, and you guys have just always been the good guys. Everyone's always rooted for you for sure. I finally recall, I want to say the Foos weren't doing something. You came out on a Gimme Gimmes run one summer, maybe 2003, and you gave me, and it was before you attached the United to it. It just said Jackson, and it had like a tiger or a lion on it.
Oh yeah.
And if you look at promo pictures of me from that era, I'm every time you see one, I'm wearing that shirt. You don't know how many people want it. What is that? It's a band. Well, dude, that shirt's awesome. Like, people wanted to buy that shirt off my back. I just want to let you know, you might want to reprint that one.
I know, that's rad. It's funny because my nickname in that era was Jackson. And it came from when I worked at Fat Records, because Chris Dodge already worked there, so it was confusing. So Mike just decided one day, like, I'm going to give you a nickname, and your nickname is Jackson, and it just stuck. It's like for that period of time in like the 90s when I was in No Use for a Name, and when we started the Gimmes and all that, that was like what people at home in San Francisco referred to me as, Jackson. But when I started that band, I got the funniest thing. I got a cease and desist letter from, no joke, from a guy named Michael Jackson. Was like, took issue with me. And it wasn't like the Michael Jackson. It was just some guy named Michael Jackson, like took issue with me using the name Jackson. So I probably didn't need to, but I just added the United to it just to get that out of my hair. Yeah.
Right. Well, as I said, just completely admired your career. I know you're a music guy, growing up. A lot of the punk rock guys I would look at, I would always say, I don't know, I would kind of box them, and they're just punk rock guys. They know 3 chords. And the longer I went along in this journey, you realize that some guys are anything but just punk rock, and you're one of those. I mean, back in the day, you had a band with Marco from Sugar Cult.
Yeah.
That's where you kind of got your start, the Lost Kittens. And then from there, you went to No Use for a Name and did 2 records. And that's where, of course, I got to know you from.
Sure.
Of course, the Gimme Gimmes happened, and then in 1999, you got the call to join the Foos, which I want to tell you, too, there was nobody in the punk rock circles, anybody that I ever met or talked to, and that was brought up a lot, that was big news, that ever had a bad word to say about you, or were, no one was even jealous, like, dude, he's joining the big band. Like, everyone was stoked for you.
Oh, right on. It is funny, like I remember the week that I got the gig in Foos, like, I got the gig. I'd auditioned a couple times, but then I found out I got the gig like on a Sunday, and we rehearsed all week, and then we did a sneaky show that Friday night at the Troubadour because we were in LA, and it was such a rad night because like all my friends came, like Fat Mike came, Joey came, Marco came, my brother Scott was there, just like all my pals from like the scene, and really like. It was a nice feeling. I expected there to be like some hard feelings a little bit in the band, because we were literally about to go on tour. And I was like, basically snuck off and auditioned for the Foo Fighters and left like right on the eve of a tour. But, we managed to all stay friends, even though that definitely threw a wrench in the works.
Yeah, well, again, that was something that always stuck with me, because I've seen it happen so much. This guy will go to that band, or one of your friends blows up and becomes huge. I've had it happen to a ton of my friends, the Blink guys or Green Day or whoever. And it's one of those things. But of course, you were still kind of 1 foot in the gimme gimmies at this time. As I said, you went on another Warped Tour, but then you did the Jackson project, which became Jackson United. From there, you did Chris Shiflett and the Dead Peasants. You guys released 2 albums in 2010 and 2013. And then in 2017, April of 2017, you released your first solo album under your name called West Coast Town. And that's the song we're going to talk about today.
Cool.
And you released 2 more records since then. Hard Lessons came out in 2019.
Yep.
And you have a forthcoming album coming out, which I checked out your new single. It's really cool and so different from West Coast Town.
Oh, yeah, right on.
Yeah, it's called Blacktop White Line. So it's so different. If I didn't know you, I probably wouldn't even know it's the same artist.
So it's black top and them little white lines. Hit the shovel in the trunk with the homemade shine. California bound, Alabama behind. Black top and them little white lines.
Yeah, it's funny. It definitely that like out of the stuff on this new record that I made, and I made it with a different producer. It's Jaron Johnston from Cadillac produced this new record, who I'd never worked with before, and he's definitely got like a style and a flair to what he does, and he had a freaking massive impact on this record. He's a really good producer. So sonically, it does sit in a kind of a different place, to the last couple records I've made. And I think that first song is maybe the one that is the most different. It was interesting because both, I'm putting it out through a label called Blue Elan here in the States and in most of the world, and then a label called Snake Farm over in the UK. And both labels, independent of each other, suggested that we put that song out first, because we're going to put out, a few songs leading into the record coming out. So, and I was like, ooh, that's scary, because it is like kind of different, but I just figured, if both labels feel strongly about it, then there's something to it. So just go with it,
Well, and I think there's a little bit of freedom too, that this is your side project. It's not going to come under as much scrutiny as the Foos, so maybe you could take a little more chances.
Sure. Yeah. And let's be honest. It's like, when you toil in obscurity, you have absolute freedom.
Well,
you can try different things, you know what I mean?
It's hard to go solo out of a band. There's not many people that have done it successfully. I've talked about it on this show, but that leads into my next thing I wanted to bring up with you. There's a lot of people that would sit back and think like, why does someone want to record solo stuff? You've done a lot of stuff outside of the band. And I've tried to explain to people that, our lives aren't this singular thing,
Sure.
And I'm sure I know there's times, because I've been there, where you've been out on the road 4 or 5 months and you get home, you don't want to do anything. You don't want to pick up a guitar. You might just want to go to the beach or go do something. Where do you find inspiration to do this solo stuff?
Yeah. I feel like it just kind of bubbles up in you after a while. I don't really try to like force it. There's no obligation to do anything, and being in a band like Foos is like a full-time life commitment, and as it is. But just as you sort of like, it can be anything. It's just sitting around on the couch at home, noodling on my acoustic guitar, and you come up with a little riff, and then that just kind of builds, and you turn it into a song. And if you look at the sort of timeline, it does seem like it's just every 2-3 years or so. You kind of get there and you make an album, whether it's Jackson United or the Dead Peasants or just my solo stuff. I mean, really, it's all been kind of solo stuff in a sense, just under different names. So I don't know. I just love making music, man. Like I really do. And there's a lot, like with my solo stuff nowadays, and for quite a while, I've been kind of in the like whatever you want to call it, rootsy Americana space, and it's just a style of music that I've loved for a long time. That it took a while for me to actually get the confidence up to go try my hand at it, and that's just the stuff that comes out of me, So I love that I'm just always working on music, It's a really lucky position to be in. It's like you spend your whole life dreaming of that, and then I think it's like the older you get, the more you become aware of like the time limit on things. You don't have that many great years left in you to make records and tour and do stuff. So you just you want to grind,
Yeah, it's crazy the appreciation I have now approaching 50 for this that I couldn't have had at 25. I knew everything when I was 25. I wasn't going to live till I'm 30. That whole mentality.
I mean, honestly, I didn't think it was going to last that long. Like I loved when I was in No Use for a Name, I didn't think like I was going to be 50 years old still making records. I just didn't think that was possible. You know what I mean?
Right.
And here I find myself I'm 50. I'm about to turn 52 in a couple of months. And I'm still going and still making records. And I mean, I remember when I first joined Foo's, the first thing I did was go out on like a promo tour because they had just made an album and everything. And I remember Dave talking in those interviews like, I'm not going to be doing this when I'm 40, and sort of, you just didn't think it was going to go on that long, you know what I mean? And here we are, and still going, and it's really a lucky thing.
Well, it really is, because if you figure 30 years ago when you and I started, the Rolling Stones were only 25. We had no gauge. We had no how long could guys do this for? None of us knew.
Yeah.
We were all flying by the seat of our pants. But the thing with solo stuff for me, if I'm going to write something, typically my first thought is if it's so catchy and I can't stop humming it, I'm at the grocery store or I'm out and I just can't get this thing out of my head, I want to save it for my band. Do you ever say to yourself, maybe I should show this idea to Dave, or maybe I should show this to whoever's playing in Jackson, now or whatever, or do you know this is going to be for a solo project?
I mean, I'm not the writer in Foo's, it's just that's not how our thing goes, So when people hear this latest record that I made, it definitely is the most sort of like all over the shop musically. Like it's, some of it is like, kind of twisted country, alt country stuff, and some of it is like could just be. You could just think of it as like alt rock or something, whatever. I don't know, and some of it sits in that more sort of Stonesy, Tom Petty kind of thing. It's really like all the different influences kind of combined, and that's the beauty of it. Like I'm not like it's one of the things I love about going out and making solo records. You're not trapped in anything, Like it doesn't. Like I could have one song with twin fiddles, and then the next song with a big loud fuzz guitar, and nobody's going to cry foul, you know what I mean? Because there's no real expectation, You're not like, it's not like I've ever had like a big hit record that you're expected to follow up, or you know what I mean? So there really is just like a freedom there to kind of do whatever the fuck feels good and sounds good.
Yeah.
And kind of, it's interesting what you just said, that thing of like when you write something and you're kind of humming it and you go to the grocery store and it's stuck in your head. That is always, it's always good to remember that with songwriting. Like, don't overthink that. Like, just chase that down. You know what I mean? Don't sit there, because, I think, I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to go like, no, that's just like some 1-4-5 shit. I've done that 1,000 times. I can't do that, like, and then you really have to
all the time
remember to let that go. Like, if something makes your, kind of gives you this, there's a reason for it, and it's good to just chase it down. Well,
I've been at this songwriting podcast for going on 3 years now, and I'll tell you, it has made me look at songs differently. I've been able to deconstruct them in a way that, for instance, this song, West Coast Town, I looked at the chord progression. It doesn't change till the bridge, but it doesn't have to. And that's what you were just talking about. It's like, wait a second, I got to change the chord here at some point. No, you don't. Not if you have the instrumentation coming in the right spots and the dynamics and are hitting you the right way. But I want to jump into the song now, Chris. It's 2 minutes and 58 seconds. We got a 4-bar intro, got an acoustic guitar panned off left, and there's an electric guitar panned off right, and a single held out chord on an organ that slightly comes up in the mix as a crescendo, with it is followed by 8 more bars of music as we are joined by the drums and bass. That acoustic guitar panned off left is now strumming chords, and the guitar panned off right is now a bit more centered in the mix and is playing a very playful lead lick. That organ at the very top is way louder in the mix here. I want to talk a little bit about Dave Cobb. Dave produced the record. So did you demo this song, and did you work on the songs like a traditional, here's the demo and deconstruct that? Or how did that process come about?
Yeah, it's funny because, Dave's process, at least at the time, and I'm sure it varies per artist, but like in leading up to that record, he was like, nah, don't make demos, dude. We just play it in the room and we'll figure it out, kind of thing. But I'd never made a record like that, so I did make some demos. And this song in particular is like really illustrates why it's so important to have a great producer when you're making a record. Why that can be such a gigantic asset to the outcome of things. Because when I wrote that song, this song was a really important song for me, kind of at that moment, because I was going through this thing, I had made those Dead Peasants records. I mean, if we back it up a little bit, I made the first Dead Peasants record, was the first kind of like more acoustic based, pedal steel on a lot of it, like it was a more like Americana flavored record, right? And then the second Dead Peasants record was a covers record, because I wanted to kind of live in some old country music for a while. And we did our sort of rough, rugged version of that, just to kind of feel that out and really like live in those songs. And because I couldn't figure out how to write like that. And I thought, like actually just doing this for a while and just playing these old Buck Owens songs and stuff, it'll rub off. I'll absorb it, But I was really kind of like struggling for a while to write. I had ideas that I couldn't like articulate. And I finally figured out that like the thing that I was doing wrong is I was trying to write like it was 1958 or something, in the language of some imagined, honky-tonk lyricist from the past, instead of just writing in my language, the way that I speak, And West Coast Town was kind of the song that the light bulb went off with, where like, it's funny, like when I first started writing it, do you know that David Allan Coe song, is it Long Haired Redneck? Country DJs knows that I'm an outlaw. They never come to see me in this town. I said that song, I was trying to write West Coast Town kind of with that tone to it, because that song has like almost like a boastful, like hip hop kind of like there's like a defiance to it. You know what I mean? Where he's like talking, he's singing about like, I won every fight I've ever been in, and all that stuff. You know what I mean? So I kind of started writing like that, but that didn't feel like me either. You know what I mean? Like that's not really who I am, So when I got to, I finally, because I knew I just wanted to write a song about where I grew up, and I finally got the lyrics going to West Coast Town. And it was based musically around that opening riff, that thing. But the feel was totally different. It was like I remember thinking it was the most like modern country sounding song I'd ever written at that time. It was like, it had more of that like almost like beachy, laid back, it was like slower, kind of thing. But I went in, and when we were making that record, I played that song for Dave, and he listened to it and went like, let's do this like Buck Owens. And I remember he put on, I don't remember what Buck Owens song it was. And like to my ear, I was like, fucking great. Buck Owens is my fucking hero. You know what I mean? It's a Bakersfield sound. You didn't have to twist my arm. But, and he put on an old, I don't remember which song as a reference for like the groove. And that's where that kind of fast swinging thing came from, which just completely changed the whole vibe of the song. And all the chords and everything are the same, and the melody is basically the same as it was. But the whole vibe of it just went from this like really slow, laid back, strummy thing to like, like it was like, we were trying to do that like 1966 kind of Bakersfield sound thing.
Yeah. Do you have a demo of that you could share with us?
I think I do somewhere, but I don't know that it's ever going to see the light of day.
Fair enough. Hey, I totally get it. And the reason I asked that, do you recall if there was any lyrical changes or an arrangement change to the demo when you presented it to David?
If there were lyrical changes, it would definitely be trimming it down. I'm sure there was more to that second. That was a really important thing for songwriting that I learned from making those records with Dave Cobb. He's really good at shaving the excess off your songs. And even sometimes when it's so hard for you, like I remember with West Coast Town, there was a whole nother half to that second verse. And he was just like, you don't need that, dude. You already said it. You already said that here. Why do you need to say it again? Yeah, to have like an impartial judge of what your song needs, especially when it's somebody who's like, been at the helm of all these great fucking records that you love, which is, I love the records that he's made over the years. So, I just put my trust in him, and even sometimes when it was hard to make the change, because you're like but I have to have that. I remember him going like on the next record, like, dude, nobody needs the third verse. Nobody needs it. you never everybody wants to put that third verse in there. Nobody needs it, man.
That's my hardest lesson as a musician, I think, Chris, the older I get, is to trust the process and trust the producer. Sometimes you got to back off and go, man, as bad as I want this second half of this second verse, I gotta put my trust in him, because look at his pedigree, look where he comes from, which I want to talk about. This sounds amazing. The tones on here, it was recorded at RCA Studio in Nashville. So the mix, everything just sounds great. And you had mentioned Americana, which, I guess they could fall into that, guys. But man, this was so much more country than I thought when I listened to it. But it's got that Southern California, it's got like that Social D, almost Mike Ness, like kind of snarl to it. It's got a little snot on it.
It's country by somebody who's not really gifted enough to play country, or at least not gifted enough to sing it. You know what I mean? Like, that's because really, like, as the more over the years, the more I went down the country music rabbit hole, which I came to kind of late. Really through Tony from No Use was the guy that turned me on to a lot of this stuff. But that is the biggest. I mean, there's the biggest difference in the songwriting is like the sort of the narrative of most country songs, kind of storytelling songs, which, a lot of like rock music isn't really. But the other big thing is like the vocals, man. Like, country singers are so good. So it's like, as somebody who's like vocally challenged in that way, it's like you gotta, like, you're always kind of like, I feel like I'm always like working around that a little bit,
I think this is right in your wheelhouse, though. I think this is perfect for your voice.
Oh, right on.
It really
thank
is.
You. Thank you.
It's definitely not forced. If you're at all worried about your voice, this is a great style and a great track to showcase that. Speaking of your voice,
I walked home all the way from East Beach with an oil spill sticking to my feet, to that little house on Salina Street, throwing rocks in the creek, my brothers and me. Yeah, Mom held us down on a county wage, clothes on our backs and food on our plates. Every Saturday night, mariachis played, and I listened through the window to the lowrider sway. Yeah, I grew up.
I walked home all the way from East Beach with an oil spill sticking to my feet, to that little house on Salina Street, throwing rocks in the creek, my brothers and me. Yeah, Mom held it down on a county wage, clothes on our backs and food on our plates. Every Saturday night, mariachis played, and I listened through the windows to the low rider sway.
Yeah, I mean, that it's like this song is the most just diary entry, autobiography, kind of take on stuff. I just wanted to write about my hometown and where I grew up and when I grew up there, which was, Santa Barbara, California at the time that I grew up. So like, I grew up on Salina Street in Santa Barbara. That was my neighborhood, the East Side. And the closest beach we could walk to was East Beach. So we would walk to East Beach with our boogie boards under our arms, pretty much every day in summer. And if you remember, in the late 60s, there was a big oil spill in Santa Barbara, and there's oil rigs off the coast there. So there's always a lot of tar on the beach. It's just like when you grow up there, it's just part of life. Pretty much every day you come home from the beach and get out your Crisco and you paper towel and you rub the tar off your feet. The creek that I referred to is the creek right down the street from my house that's probably overflowing right now because we've had a lot of rain. But it was like the creek down the street from my house that we would catch pollywogs and go root around in when you were kids and go get messy and get muddy, and that was like, it's entertainment. It's the creek, man. It's
right,
part of the neighborhood. And what else? And that line about my mom. My mom held it down on a county wage. My mom was a probation officer.
Oh,
and that was her job. And we, my parents divorced when I was pretty young, and I was born in Santa Barbara. We moved around a little bit while my parents were still together, and then even after they separated. But when my mom won custody of us in like 1977, we were in Santa Barbara pretty much from then out until I moved to LA when I was like 18 or whatever. But anyway, so my mom was a probation officer, and that next line, put clothes on our backs and food on our plates. That was actually kind of playful because we used to make fun of my mom all the time. She would always, and I don't know if she ever actually said this. She might have said it once, something about like, I work my fingers to the fucking bone to put food on the plates and on the table and clothes on your bed. I think she maybe said it once, and we just made fun of her for the rest of her life over it. Or my mom is still alive, but for the rest, when we were kids, we just would. That was like our imitation of my mom. I work my fingers to the bone, which she did. She did.
Yeah. Dealing with the dregs of society as a probation officer.
Exactly. And funny
having to come home to you and your brother.
Yeah. Exactly. And my older brother, Mike, too. When I turned 18, when I dropped out of high school, like right leading into my senior year, and I just went and fucked around with my friends and got drunk at the beach and was really just didn't have a lot going on. And I was 17 at the time, and I turned 18 in May of whatever that was, 1989. And the week before my birthday, my mom goes, all right, I'm done, watching you come home drunk from the beach every day, and I can smell you smoking cigarettes or whatever, like you're just not doing anything. You're like, I got you a job at the probation department. So you're working at the probation department now. Go see Linda on Monday. And I was like, what? And anyway, it was like the best thing that ever happened because she basically made me go work at the probation department in the records room, essentially. And with that job, I was able to save up money to buy an amp. I bought a brand new Mesa Boogie Mark II or Mark III or whatever it was. And I moved to LA that January. I had saved up enough money to buy an amp and get my first apartment with my friends down in LA. That was it. I was gone. So thank God for the probation department. Anyway, so there's that. And then also that last bit about Saturday night mariachis played and listening to the lowriders sway. We live next to our neighbor right next to us. It's a funny thing. Like, it just speaks to like kind of California culture is weird. Like we didn't really kind of knew our neighbors, but like you didn't really know our neighbors. You know what I mean? Like you knew who they were, but it's not like we all knew each other, But there was this family that lived next door to us that would have they're like a Mexican-American family, and they would have these really loud like parties on the weekends, and it'd be like mariachi music. And that's like a childhood memory of mine, is sitting there with the window open, and I could just hear, like kind of music going. And then also like somebody lived in that house was a member of this car club called the Brown Sensations. It was like a lowrider car club back then. And so that's what I was kind of referencing, listening to the lowrider sway.
Yeah, so none of this is made up. This is actual, your childhood, which I have to ask.
100%.
Was this, written after the fact, you were regaling your youth, or was this something you had in a book that you jotted down when you were 16 or 17?
Oh, no, this was way after the fact. Yeah, this was like right, leading into making that West Coast Town record, because I tried like lyrically like a few different approaches to it, but then that was the one that I kind of settled on,
Hey everybody, don't go anywhere. We got lots more with Chris Shiflett coming right up after a few words from our sponsors.
Hey, what's up? This is Blake Weiland. I'm the host of the Tone Mob podcast. It's a show where I interview guitar people about guitar stuff. We talk about their pedals, their amps, their accessories, their preferences, all that stuff, as well as a healthy dose of whatever comes up. Topics have ranged from aliens to addiction and anywhere in between. Oh yeah, and pizza. We're definitely going to be talking about pizza. So get the show wherever you're listening to this podcast at. Just search The Tone Mob in your search bar and it will pop right up. Come join us. We're having a lot of fun. Thanks for checking it out.
Do you like to laugh, geek out on music, and learn all about that band or artist who had that one song back in the day, but then seemed to fall off the face of the earth? If so, you need to subscribe to One Hit Thunder. Together with an array of interesting and hilarious guests, we do a weekly dive into one-hit wonders like Eiffel 65's Blue, Krayshawn's Gucci Gucci, EMF's Unbelievable, Delamitri's Roll to Me, Los Del Rio's Macarena, Musical Youth's Pass the Dutchie, and even Patrick Swayze's She's Like the Wind. So are you subscribed to One Hit Thunder or what? As Desiree would say, you gotta be. And as K7 would encourage, you gotta come, baby, come and join in on the fun of the One Hit Thunder podcast.
Come, baby, come, baby, baby, come, come. Come, baby, come, baby, baby, come. It's been a long, long year.
And now, back to the show.
Well, there's a lot going on in this double verse. After it breaks down from that intro, the kick drums here with like a side stick on a snare. The acoustic panned off left is strumming now. That electric guitar panned off right is ringing out chords on the one. And on the back half verse here, we get a little bit of harmony and unison, Chris. You're singing unison. I can hear you with yourself, but you're doing some harmonies in there. How did that come about? Did Dave help you with that? Because I've always loved stuff like that. And I try not to shy away from it because, you know, when I'm doing harmonies to myself, I'll always want to make sure every note is an actual harmony, but it doesn't have to be.
Well, it's interesting, you know, all the harmony stuff. I mean, I think I probably doubled the choruses or something, and maybe I'm like, you know, going like this a little bit in there, you know, who knows? But all the harmony vocals on the record are this woman out in Nashville named Kristen Rogers, who Dave works with a lot. She's great, fantastic singer. And I'll tell you something. It was really
so
wild.
That's not you. That's not you.
No, not the harmony. No, that's Kristen for sure. I mean, there's probably a double. I'd have to go back and listen to it, but I'm probably doubled, and then she's harmonizing. But I tell you, it was wild, man, because I remember when we were making that record, like, I don't remember exactly how we were, like a little ways into the vocals, and I was talking to Dave about harmonies. Oh, and he's like, oh, I got this gal, we should send it to. Or he said, oh, this woman, Kristen Rogers, it does. I work with a lot. She's great. I go, oh, cool. Let's have her do it. And he goes, oh, I already sent it to her, and he had already sent her all the songs because I just had my lyrics like on the music stand while we were doing vocals, and so they had just like copied all the lyrics and sent her everything. And I think she was she didn't come into the studio to do it. I think she was on tour with somebody and just brings a like little recording rig and maybe like did it in a hotel room or something. She's really wonderful.
I would not have picked that as a woman's voice. I thought for sure it was you, or maybe, I don't know if Dave sang or somebody else. Did not know that was a woman's voice. Also on the back half of verse 1, I think the organ might be in here buried, and I definitely hear either a pedal or a lap steel panned off left.
Oh,
we get the first taste of that. Is that a lap or a pedal?
Pedal steel. That is Robbie Turner, the legendary Robbie Turner, who is a just monster pedal steel player out there.
It is so good, and the way that the pedal steel builds in this song is classic too. You could, if I had sat down tomorrow with a track like this and wanted to do something with a pedal steel, I have no experience. I wouldn't know how to layer it. I wouldn't know how to have it come in, but it's awesome. It's flawless here.
Yeah, Robbie is amazing. He's like really one of the legends of that instrument. Among other things, I mean, he played in Waylon Jennings' band for years and the Highwaymen and all that stuff. I mean, he's a really interesting cat. He actually grew up in Memphis. When he was a little kid, he used to go hang out outside of Graceland and in the early Elvis days, and they'd see how Elvis would come out and like talk to them, and they'd all be like a bunch of kids hanging out at the fence. And he had some crazy story about going into Graceland and somehow got in there, and when he was like a kid, and was in Elvis's kitchen and was looking in Elvis's refrigerator, and like Elvis walked in and screamed, get the fuck out of here! Whoa! And ran in. But I mean, just nuts. Like that guy's. I mean, Robbie Turner's parents played in Hank Williams' band.
Oh, geez.
Not Hank Jr., but Hank Williams. So that's the kind of like lineage that dude has. He's really an amazing cat.
Okay, well, not taking anything away from you. This track sounds amazing, and there's a reason why. We got some great breadth of talent here. Well, chorus 1 is at the 41-second mark. We get to chorus 1 quick.
Yeah, I grew up in a West Coast town back before they chased the working class out. We don't fuck around where I grew up in a West Coast town.
Yeah, I grew up in a West Coast town, back before they chased the working class out. You know, we don't fuck around where I grew up in a West Coast town.
See, that's the remnant of the David Allan Coe lyric that I left in there tonally. You know what I mean? And it's funny, and this is like a real like songwriting inspiration comes from unlikely sources sometimes. And I remember like I've heard like other songwriters I respect like talk about how you always have to have like your antenna up and you always got to be listening in on people's conversations and just shit that's kind of flying around. And that line, "We don't fuck around," I actually took that. I was watching, I don't remember who he fought, but I was watching, I don't know if you follow boxing at all, but Canelo Alvarez it was like his post-fight interview. And this was before he had fought Triple G the first time. And the guy interviewing him asked him like, basically like, are you ducking Triple G? You know, or kind of one of those kind of questions. And his response was, in Mexico, we don't fuck around. and I remember when he said that, I was like, whoa, that's great. And I just wrote that in my little journal. And I was like, I'm going to use that for something. And so then you know, when I was writing this song, I remembered him saying that, and I don't know, it just kind of fit, you know.
I like that line though, because I like what it's saying, and you have a little snarl, you know. There's a little piss and vinegar on the vocal there, but it's still playful. It doesn't feel like you're trying to be hard.
Well, that's the funny thing is I think like sometimes, at least with like some of my old friends and stuff from growing up, maybe misunderstand. I'm not really referring to myself, and I don't mean it in like a tough guy way. I mean it more like just like that time in the place that I come from. And believe you me, we fucked around a lot. So let's put that to bed. There's a lot of fucking around, but I just mean like it's hard to even articulate what I mean. But I just mean it in a broader sense, you know.
Sure. And that's what I took away from it.
Yeah.
That's what I took away from that lyric. Chorus 1 got the same instrumentation pretty much as the verse, except the snare drum is now in. The organ is very present, panned slightly off left, and the pedal steel is panned off left here. At the very end of the chorus, the chord progression changes a bit here for the first time in the song with that walk down that you do. That gets us into the 8-bar reintro, like the top of the song, except the pedal steel panned off left is here in this reintro before we get into verse 2.
July, Ledbetter Beach, salted digging in my lungs so deep. Chased her all night, she couldn't see. It was paradise, but I had to leave. Yeah.
4th of July, Ledbetter Beach, salt air digging in my lungs so deep. Chased her all night till she couldn't see. It was paradise, but I had to leave. And we're getting a single verse here because I think Dave wanted to chop the back half, right?
Chopped it right off. I don't even remember what it was, but it was clearly unnecessary.
Right. And so what's happening here lyrically?
Again, back in my day, I don't think they do this anymore up there, but Ledbetter Beach was where Ledbetter Beach is like right below the Mesa in Santa Barbara. Like, have you been to Santa? You probably played in Santa Barbara a bunch of times.
Oh yeah.
So Ledbetter Beach is right there, sort of at the bottom of the Mesa, just over from the harbor, and up on the hill is the City College, and that's where they would launch fireworks on 4th of July. And so Ledbetter Beach was a fucking like battle scene on 4th of July. So everybody would dig out pits and people would just be running around wasted and like shooting M80s at each other. And it was just freaking mayhem down there on 4th of July. But really, really fun. But I don't think they do it anymore because I think it maybe, you know, it's like too out of control by modern standards, you know, but so that's what that's referring to. The girl reference is sort of maybe one of those like sort of composite things where that could be a few different people I'm referring to, and then chased her all night, but she couldn't see. It was paradise, but I had to leave. Like Santa Barbara is fucking paradise, and still is paradise, and has always been paradise. But there was just something in me growing up that like I had to like go. I just desperately wanted to go, experience the world and get out.
And I see that a lot of times where, something in this instance will be autobiographical, let's say, as a lyricist, but you get to that point in the song where you're like, well, we kind of have to have a player here, and a lot of times when you make it about a love interest, it tugs at a certain heartstring,
Sure.
and you're able to embellish a little bit. Maybe it wasn't one particular girl, but there was a girl at some point. I love that.
Yeah. And I don't know. That's just like, I don't know. Like I spent a lot of those early years like kind of being like brokenhearted over various people. You know what I mean? Like, I think that was like central to my teenage makeup. You grew up in Florida, right?
Yes.
So that line about like the salt air digging in my lungs so deep, like, did you have that thing? Like every time I would come home from the beach, like my lungs hurt. I don't know what causes that, but it's like something about the saltwater air like gets in your lungs, and it's like but it's like that kind of a good feeling. It's like, like after you work out, you're sore, but you feel sore because you just did some shit and you feel good about it. It's like the same thing with like that tightness in your lungs after a long day at the beach. You're like,
well,
yeah.
do you guys get red tide out where you're at?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Because man, you want to talk about your lungs burning when that would happen in Florida? I definitely would get that, but I know what you're talking about with that salt air. Verse 2 here. Once again, we got a single verse. There's harmonies throughout, and I forgot to mention, Chris, there was harmonies throughout the chorus, which I'm still tripping out. I can't believe that's a lady's voice. I swear.
Yeah.
I thought that was you. It's the same instrumentation here on verse 2 as the back half of verse 1, although the organ is noticeably louder here in verse 2. Chorus 2 comes right on after verse 2 here. It's the same lyric as chorus 1 and the same instrumentation.
Had to leave, yeah, I grew up in a West Coast town back before they chased the working class out. We don't fuck around where I grew up in a West Coast town.
As I go through these songs on this show, I'm looking, and there's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes the chorus is always the same. Sometimes you'll ask somebody, well, the line changed up here. Why'd you change this one? And, well, we, didn't want it to get boring or stale. I noticed this one was the same. Was there ever a discussion with Dave? We should bring more information in here, or was that the chorus?
I don't remember, but I have tried to get away from, I used to have that thing of like, you always have to change at least one thing every time you go back to it. And, that can be cool too. I mean, I certainly have done that in a bunch of songs. Or, maybe it's nice to flip something around when you get to the last chorus or whatever, but it makes it harder when you go out and do it live. Because then
it certainly does.
You always fuck that lyric up, don't you?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And do you know how many times I just heard it on the radio the other day? I'm driving down the road and it came on, and every time it does, I'll crank it up. I love this song, but it's like, how many times does Petty say "free falling" in the song "Free Falling"? That's all he says.
Yeah.
But there doesn't need to be anything else. The lyric is perfect, the conviction with it, but how do you know when you have that lyric? For me, it's like, I got to put more in there. My lyrics couldn't possibly be good enough just to sing it over and over.
Yeah. No, I know. God, Tom Petty was such a master of using, like, not overcomplicating his lyrics with a bunch of fancy 50-cent words unnecessarily.
Sure.
Just kind of simple, straightforward, conversational. Never sounded like a put on, always sounded like him or what you imagined him to be, because obviously none of us knew him,
Yeah, exactly. Well, after chorus 2, there's an 8-bar re-intro. That pedal steel panned off left, it sounds killer here, and it's really coming up in the mix in this point of the song. I'm really hearing it now. Was that intentional?
I think probably a lot of the dynamic of what Robbie did is probably just, I'd have to go back and look. But I bet a lot of that was just him working it, working the volume pedal. Cause he really like all great pedal steel players, like he really knows when to be kind of ride it high and get hotter and bring it down and vibe it out. But I'd be curious to see, crack the file open and see if there's like a lot of like, volume moves in the mix. I suspect not. I suspect it's mostly just him.
And that's interesting. And for the listeners, what Chris is saying here is those dynamics, a lot of times as players, we'll play something really soft or we'll play something really hard. And coming from a punk rock background, you can attest to this. Like my first couple of records, it was like you push record and you just played as fast and as hard till your fingers were bleeding.
Yeah.
I didn't know what dynamics were. And finally, I had a producer one time tell me, this part's delicate. What does that mean? Well, you got to play this. Maybe try to play it with your fingers. What are you talking about? I play with the pick. I had no idea of this whole other world and way to approach things. Right after that 8-bar re-intro, we get the bridge. And Chris, this is the first true chord progression change here when we go to that E minor.
Now I'm long gone, like stoplights on the freeway. You tear me down, but I'll never change.
We got the harmonies all over this, and again, I wrote the pedal steel here is just great. You know, this guy's a ringer, Robbie, that came in. Did you see any of him doing it?
Oh yeah, no, I sat there in the room with him doing the whole thing, and he banged the whole thing out in either one day or maybe 2 days or whatever. You know, it was such a pleasure because I'm so used in those. I really just overall with this record, I tried not to micromanage anything, and with Robbie, you really didn't have to. You just didn't have, like, I think the only thing we had a conversation about tone. I kind of like, I'm not a fan of overdriven pedal steel generally. I mean, you know, sometimes you hear it and it's cool, but I like that weepy, sad 60s sounding steel is what tugs at my heart. And I think we talked about that, and that was probably all the, you know, if you even want to call it instruction, that was probably all the input I had. And then we would just put the song up and I think, you know, play it down, and he'd chart it out, and then he would just be off to the races, and he would just nail it in a couple of takes.
It's amazing when you watch these session guys that's all they do is just hop from, and the reason that they're session guys is because they're that good. Yeah. They're unreal. You know, I've seen some of these LA cats, and you're sitting across from going, okay, they played it 5 times through, and the producer's like, okay, you can go home now. Like, what did I just witness? It's so cool.
With Cobb, that was a really interesting part of working with him, because I was used to, you know, probably making records the same way that you probably made records back in the day, you know. And he was really like big on like, let's not overdo it. Like, you know, if you did 5 takes, that would have been a lot of takes. You know, so probably more often you're doing maybe like 3 or something, you know what I mean? And you might even be keeping the first half of the first one, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And so like he's really like good with not overdoing it, you know, keeping that fresh feeling.
That's what this process sounds like. It sounds like you were able to come in with these bass songs, and he was able to build them up with the players. That had to be so cool to witness.
Oh yeah. For sure. And I'd never made a record like that ever, you know?
Yeah.
And it was just, the whole thing was just changed a lot of my perspective on making records, but also like a lot on songwriting. And then, you know, the next record I made, Robbie wasn't, he was in kind of poor health at that time. He was going to play on the next one too, but then he wasn't able to do it. So kind of last minute, I called Paul Franklin, who's another just incredible steel player. And it was, you know, same deal. He came in and just banged it out in an evening or whatever, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing. Like, that's such a like an instrument that I have so much respect for. That when you watch somebody that really is a master of it, it's fun.
I've never played one.
Yeah, I've tried. I own one. I own one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not gonna pretend I'm a player. I'm an owner.
I've always wanted to one of these days, but definitely bucket list. Well, after the bridge, we get into a 16-bar guitar solo. I love this solo. There's some great interplay between the lead guitar and the pedal steel here. From bars 8 through 16 here, there's another lead guitar panned off left that joins in, and I love how this builds up into what I'm calling the chorus 3 breakdown.
In a West Coast town, back before they chased the working class out. You know we don't fuck around where I grew up. Yeah, I grew up.
Same lyric here, up to where I grew up. You don't get West Coast Town on the breakdown. It stops there. We get harmonies on those last two lines. The acoustic panned off left here. That's all that is here except a single hi-hat hits and an organ only. And you get that unison harmony thing happening here before the full band comes back in on I Grew Up. The whole band is in for a full chorus.
Yeah, I grew up in a West Coast town back before the chase the working class out. You know we don't fuck around where I grew up in a West Coast town. In a West Coast town.
And chorus 3 is the same lyric as the other ones on In a West Coast Town. There's an 8-bar outro at that point. Halfway through, you say In a West Coast Town again through that musical outro. And on bar 7, the whole band hits. Dun, 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 dun. And then we fade out and it comes to an end.
Yeah.
How'd you know the song was over? Did you always end it the same way? Was that how it was, or did that change in the studio?
I'm sure that changed in the studio, but I don't remember. I mean, it would be fun to dig up that old demo. I'm such a lazy demoer that and I think for that round of demos, I think it was like me playing drums on it too, and that's like a freaking horror show, believe me, because I'm not a skilled drummer at all. So me like fumbling through, and probably didn't like take the time to go in and like, beat detective it into submission.
I would wage a bet that I'm a worse drummer than you are, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, that was one of the upsides of the COVID lockdown year was it forced me to learn how to program drums in Logic.
Yes.
Which is like,
yes, me
I was
too.
like, I'm never gonna waste my time trying to drum through a demo thing ever again.
No, Logic is your friend. I'll say that loud,
a million
as loud
percent.
as I can.
Yeah.
But, well, I got to tell you, for the listeners out there, make sure you check out Chris performing this online. Go to YouTube. It's on at Paste Studios. And what I like, and I watched some live videos. I watched the full band. The crowd definitely loves this song. You could tell they knew it, your fans. And that Paste Studios, what I love about that's just you alone. And the song translates to just being alone.
I love going out and doing those like solo acoustic shows. That was like something that I was always really scared to do, and then there was a point there where I did it a whole bunch and just wanted to do it until I got comfortable with it, and I did, and I really enjoy it. I haven't done that for a while, but it's always fun to go out and do that. I mean, that really is, talk about stripping back your songs. I mean, you are like stripped all the way back,
Yeah, and you talk about being apprehensive. It's just you're naked with a guitar. That's it, buddy. And there's no band to cover for your flubs.
No gain, no just no volume. None of that stuff. Like that's where you really realize. Like I realized at a certain point, like man, I really rely on string bends. Playing guitar solos, like when you're playing acoustic and you don't have that to like, that's sort of like as a lead player, that's like how I reset and sort of take a breath to think about what comes next. Do something, and then hold a note. And then when you don't have that option, you're like, oh shit, there's nothing. You just got to keep going or not.
And hope nobody notices. That's
exactly. Yeah.
Well, Chris, man, thank you so much for sitting in. And before we break, is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with? What you have going up, the Foos, anything else?
I think we kind of covered most of it in the beginning part. I got a bunch of songs coming out this year, and then ultimately it'll be a full length record like in October, something like that. So, yeah, doing shows here and there, and putting out music, yeah, and doing podcasts like this, yeah. It's it's funny. I will tell you real quick. I saw somebody posted online a picture from the first No Use for a Name tour that I ever did, and it was such a great time capsule of that era because I'm like, my head's shaved. I look like I'm 10 years old. I'm playing my Les Paul. There's like stickers all over my Les Paul, like that I would never do now. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But the most important part of it, stylistically, is I'm wearing like gigantic triple XL no effects shorts. That like are almost long enough to be pants. Yeah, I mean, you remember?
Yeah,
that was the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 3X T-shirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Born and raised, I was born and raised. You might change, but I must stay the same where I was born and raised.
Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Chris Shiflett, but don't go anywhere. We got the band you might not know, and we got the rap coming up. This is a very Chris-heavy episode. Yes, we had Chris Shiflett as a guest, but now you're going to get to listen to your friends Chris and Chris do the rap right after a few words from our sponsors.
Hey, this is Chris Santos, host of Delirious Nomads, the Blacklight Media podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media Podcast Network. Delirious Nomads is a podcast about all things heavy metal, as well as breakdowns of your favorite combat sports. And me being a chef and all, we'll be riffing on some food talk every week with very special guests from across the globe. Listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey everybody, Satan here. I know what you're thinking. Jesus Christ, Satan has a podcast now too? No, that's not it. But I am here to tell you about a podcast, and it's one that's all about my favorite band, Punchline. Not the band you expected me to say, right? You probably figured I'd like Slayer, or maybe some backwards Beatles records or something. Those are okay. But you usually find me rocking out to fan-favorite Punchline albums like Action or Lion while I'm torturing dead people for all of eternity. Punchline's podcast is called A Band Called Punchline, and it's super entertaining to listen to this documentary-style look back at the 25 years of my favorite band. Honestly, I'm really feeling like I'm getting to know these guys, and their story is amazing. I'm so ready for them to get down here. I have so many questions. I gotta give them credit for catching on to my whole 37 thing, too. There's a reason why they're my favorite band, and if you listen to their podcast, they might become yours, too. A Band Called Punchline is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Check it out, and I'll see you all in hell.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Chris DeMakes a podcast, all you have to do is email your best song via MP3 only and a short bio to bandyoumightnotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is Heel Turn, a punk rock band from Prague, Czech Republic. Their latest album is titled The Way You Life Your Live Is Strange. Here's a snippet of their song, Antipathy.
I'm aiming, fucking up every opportunity. It's ain't no way, Jose. Not today, no back for me. I gotta release this energy. Gotta release energy. Not looking back, I'm pushing up the daisies. No anecdotes, game segments, joke, just lazy.
The Rap with Chris and Chris.
So Chris, you and I were both really excited about this one. It's so cool that Chris's roots are in our little punk rock world. I shouldn't say little, I guess, but that he came from our world of punk rock and has gone on to have the biggest musical experience that anyone could ever fathom. And to see that he has had that for the past 25 years or whatever, and he's still such a down-to-earth and, for lack of a better word, normal guy. By the way, I consider us normal guys. Do you consider us? Do you consider you and I normal guys? I consider us normal guys. Some people might argue that, but my point is that's so cool.
Yeah, he's always been that way, so humble, and I think that goes, to what I was saying to him about there was never a cross word about Chris Shiflett. Everyone was stoked. Maybe the No Use guys were a little bummed because he bailed on their tour or whatever. They just made a record, but that's all been long forgotten, of course. But just what a guy, just world-class musician who just keeps it real.
Yeah, you would never, if you were talking to him, hanging out with him, whatever, you wouldn't know that he's in one of the biggest bands ever. Mm-hmm. you wouldn't really know that. There's a lot of things he said in this episode where I was like, oh, I relate to that. One of the funny things, and I'm curious as to what your take on this is, he talked about how growing up, I mean, I guess I live next door to my grandparents, so I can't totally say that. But for the most part, I never really know my neighbors. I'm not saying I'm proud of it. I have neighbors all around me. I don't really know any of them. Do you know your neighbors?
It's funny. I was talking to someone about this not too long ago. When I lived in Michigan, when I first moved to Florida, everybody knew their neighbors. It was like Leave It to Beaver. You'd go borrow a cup of sugar from the woman across the street, and then the next day someone would eat some salt, and they'd come knock on your door, and you'd bring cookies over to the neighbor. There was that thing. I'm telling you that times have gotten weird the last 25 or 30 years. Things have changed, and people just, they'll give you every bit of information on themselves online, but don't come to my house.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, dude, I'll tell you, the only guy, and I give him credit for trying to be like a nice neighbor or whatever. There's this guy who comes around and he knocks on my door, just shows up sometimes. I seriously hide because he just wants to talk to me. He eventually wants to turn the conversation into trying to get me to come to his church. I think I told you about this guy before. I'm like, dude, I don't go to church. Can't we just talk about something normal? Anyway, yeah, I don't really talk to my neighbors. I'm not saying I'm proud of it, but I kind of could relate to that. I loved the story that Chris told about his mom getting him a job at the probation office.
Yeah.
And then him making the money, buying his amp and moving to LA. I think that's cool, right?
It is, and he even said it. It was kind of like the best thing that could have happened. He didn't know it at the time. He's like, what? She did what a mom is supposed to do, not be your friend, be your parent in that situation. And,
right.
Think of this poor woman, they kind of mocked her, about putting clothes on their backs and food on their plates, but that's what she did. She was providing as a single mom. And as I said to Chris, she's dealing with the heathens of society. As a probation officer, have to come home to her 3 boys. That had to be daunting.
Right. Yeah. That's enough smoking cigarettes on the beach today, Chris. You got to get a job. All right. Back to the songwriting a little bit here. You talked about changing chorus lyrics versus doing the same thing every time. Chris, we've been doing this podcast for a while. I don't know what the answer is here. I think I would probably lean to repeating the chorus, not changing it so people could learn it and sing along. I would lean that way, but there's no right or wrong. I think we're never going to find a right or wrong answer to anything on this podcast. It's just that everyone's process is different.
It is. And we've talked about this, Chris. We've talked about, there's a song that was recorded by somebody in 1971, and somebody else re-recorded that song in 75 and in 78 and someone in 85. And it wasn't until, I'll pick an artist, it wasn't until Huey Lewis recorded the song that it became a hit. It's the same song. It's the same lyrics. It's the way that person sold it. There's no right or wrong answers in songwriting. That's why it's so fascinating. This will never get old, because for this song, the chorus lyric is the same, and for this song, they changed it up, and they're both massive hits. Why? It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. It's also cool, man, to go into this situation, which I think Chris said this was the first time. Now, not that he hasn't been surrounded by amazing musicians. It's every step of the way. But to be the songwriter and step into a situation where you're just bringing in ringers. You get to focus on writing the song and bringing that song to life. But every person who's playing on that is a ringer, and they're just going to crush it. Especially when you're dabbling in new types of music, that this isn't a punk rock or a hard rock song. This is a country influenced song, so to have such amazing players on it just allows you to focus on the song.
Yeah, and I think it was a very, cool new experience, but it was also freeing to Chris to be able to go, okay, here's my ideas. He trusted in producer Dave Cobb. And then, the vocalist, the backing vocalist, he didn't even see her perform the parts. Dave Cobb sent it off to her. He gets it back because she was that good. And he's like, oh yeah, it was amazing, which again, I'm still shocked. I did not think that was a lady's voice on the backups. I thought it was Chris.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that. I wanted to jump in and say, as the third Chris saying this, I'm also a really bad drummer. I obviously have good rhythm. I'm a bassist, and I feel like I'm pretty good at bass, but over the pandemic, I set up the drums in the living room. I have a drum set, and I would just play along to like the Lauryn Hill album as best as I could. And I just eventually was like, you know what? It's fun. It's fun to play drums, but I'm bad at them.
Yeah, well, that's why Chris said, Logic. He spent the pandemic learning that, as I did, and it's finally a drummer I can program in 2 seconds. This is right up my alley. It's great. There's no more guesswork.
Right. And also, one more thing I wanted to say when it comes to putting out solo music, I've put out some solo music over the course of my music career or whatever, but it's scary to do that. It's nice to be able to experience something with your buddies, whether it's performing live. I'm confident as hell when I step out there with my friends, but stepping out somewhere by yourself and performing, that's intimidating. You've done that some.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Are you intimidated when you do it, or does your live experience in Less Than Jake just translate straight to that?
No, it's definitely a different ball of nerves than it is when I'm with the band, because as Chris and I discussed, there's no one to lean on. There's no one to cover your mistakes. It's only so loud and big you can get an acoustic guitar to sound. You're essentially naked up there with a guitar and your voice. So any mistakes are gonna all be on you. But I also think that's the allure of it too. It makes me want to do it every once in a while because it is different than what I'm used to with the band. And the band at this point, much like you with Punchline, it's so comfortable to walk side stage and get on the stage with the guys. It's just you've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. And Chris, you know what else we've been doing for so long?
I have no idea.
The After Party Podcast. It's our other podcast that if you join our supporting cast at ChrisDeMakes.com, you get a weekly bonus episode of our other podcast called The After Party. Apparently people really like it. Every week, people are leaving us comments and stuff about it. So, if you're interested, head to ChrisDeMakes.com. Not only do you get weekly bonus episodes, but you also support the podcast that you love, which I'm talking about Chris DeMakes podcast, by the way.
That was the perfect segue. Thank you, Chris. And please give me a follow on Instagram at Less Than Chris D. And I'm still doing those custom songs for you or that special someone in your life. That's right. A custom song written and recorded by me. Hit me up, chrisdemakes@gmail.com. I'd love to write you one. And I want to thank this week's guest, Chris Shiflett, for sitting with us. And we'll see you next week.
Yes, hello out there, everyone. I'm Hal Schwartz.
And I'm Flynn McLean. Together we host None But the Brave, a podcast dedicated to the music and career of Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce and E Street Band are on tour right now for the first time in 6 years, and we're taking a detailed look at what's happening on stage in our bi-weekly episodes.
We've also been recently joined by some very exciting guests, including rock journalist Warren Zanes and Stephen Hayden, Backstreet's Magazine founder Charles Cross, and Barstool's Kirk Minahan.
If you're a diehard Springsteen fan, this is the show for you.
So please subscribe to None But the Brave on your favorite podcasting platform, and we hope to see you further on up the road.
Thank you so much. We'll be seeing you.
Hey there, I am Johnny Christ from Avenged Sevenfold, and I've got a podcast called Drinks with Johnny you're going to want to check out. I sit down with a bunch of different people from all different walks of life, from professional wrestlers to actors, comedians, fighters, musicians, everything in between. I'm just looking to make some friends and have a good time doing it. So if that sounds like something you're into, go check out Drinks with Johnny, streaming everywhere now.